Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me about this. Um, I know that the housing crisis is impacting everyone in our community, and I wanted to start by asking you how the crisis has been impacting you personally and maybe your family personally as well.
Oh, Will, one of the big lessons of COVID has been there are many people who don't have a place to call home. And when we told everybody to go home, shelter at home, work from home, learn from home, so that we avoid the spread of the virus, it really further highlighted just how many people in our community across the country don't have a place to call home. I certainly know what it's like not to have a safe roof over my head. And one of the reasons why our proposal to move forward to build more housing, to help young people buy their first home, to protect the rights of Canadians in the housing market means a lot to me. Is I know what it's like to go from shelter to social housing to home ownership. And certainly in our community, what I've seen over the past, 530-ish days of the pandemic, the face of downtown has changed. The challenges around homelessness and addictions and mental health challenges have really been highlighted and just more visible these past few days, and I take that personally too. This is my home. This is our downtown. This is our community, and there can't be people here without a place to call home. So our plan is one that's in line with personal experiences of folks that we see all too often in our community and around the country.
So it seems that every party in this election is promising more affordable housing. But I wonder if you can talk to me about what you mean when you say affordable housing, sort of like what your definition of that is, and how a Liberal government would increase the stock of housing that's affordable to someone that makes minimum wage in Peterborough.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Will. And I know that 80% of the market rent definition is something that we've spoken about before. For me, it's about the entire spectrum of housing, from shelters for women and homeless folks all the way to homeownership. And our plan addresses that. First and foremost, we're going to build more housing so that people without a home right now have a safe place to call home. And there are many tools on the table to do that. For example, we're going to be offering municipalities, for example, like the city, about $4 billion to accelerate the pace at which we build more housing. One of the reasons why housing and rent is unaffordable in our community is because of the imbalance between supply and demand. There are many people wanting to live here for all the right reasons, but this housing stock does not meet that demand. So building more housing, giving incentives to co-ops, to nonprofits, as well as private developers is going to address that. The housing conversation too, Will, as you know, is part of a bigger conversation about income security and economic justice and ultimately jobs. So there is a plan to create more jobs, to help people who have been pushed out of the labor market because of lack of childcare, or because the skills they currently have are no longer in line with the needs of the labor market. There's a plan to skill people up, for example, cover the cost of up to 90% of tuition, give incentives to employer to hire people, to address income insecurity, cutting childcare fees by half by next year, and then moving to $10 a day childcare is going to leave hundreds of dollars a month in people's pockets so that they can afford other things in life. But adding to the stock and helping people rent to own, for example, and protecting the rights when they're going after their first home, all these are going to make a significant impact in what is available in our community and who's able to afford housing. For young people who are saving up to buy their first home, right? You and I talked to people who went to school and got a degree and then went and got another degree so that they could get a job to afford a home. And in our community have seen the house, the price of housing rise so incredibly quickly over the past 2 years. They keep being pushed out of the market. So now there is proposals to allow them to save for more, to save money on the CMHC mortgage, to have more transparency in the bidding process, so they don't have to, put in really, really big bids, hoping to secure that dream home. So housing affordability is for the person who's on the streets, getting them the place they need to call home so that they can piece their life together. It's for the young person, the student in our community, trying to find a decent place to live while they study and work. And it's also for the young folks who work so hard, 2-3 jobs, and the dream of homeownership keeps moving further and further away because they can't afford it. We have a plan for that. And I really hope that folks spend time reviewing the plan, reaching out to me to talk about the plan. This is obviously a subject I'm passionate about. And if our community is going to succeed and develop sustainably, we're going to have to manage our housing situation better. And the federal government's putting, the Liberal Party, if re-elected, is putting on the table significant new tools to address the market, the volatility in the market, and more inclusion in the market.
Yeah. So in the 2019 election campaign, you said that the Liberal government had a plan to build 2,000 new affordable units in Peterborough. And the National Housing Strategy has been like the main vehicle for realizing that goal. So far, the National Housing Strategy has supported the construction of just over 200 housing units in Peterborough, and not all of those units have any affordability requirements. So I'm wondering if you're satisfied with the level of construction that the National Housing Strategy has delivered for Peterborough so far.
So let me clarify, and I'm just pulling up my notes here. In Peterborough-Kawartha, we've supported more than 1,700 units of affordable housing. That's rent to geared, that's accessible units. We've brought in $65 million in investments. Just, this year we brought in $40 million in investments through the National Housing Strategy. And we've been able to partner with folks like the Kawartha Participation Project, with Habitat for Humanity, for the Mount Community Center, the Ontario Aboriginal housing folks. And what's left now, there's a really exciting, ambitious plan, as you know, with the city of Peterborough to build around 1,400 more units of affordable housing. And the city is going to determine when those shovels go in the ground. But, I've seen this proposal, I've been briefed on it, about 3 years ago. And when the city's ready to go, I'll be there. I'll be there to go after it hard and make sure that we get our fair share of housing in our community as well. So the housing strategy is working. It's delivering for people in Peterborough. But now it's time to, particularly post-COVID, to step it up and to seize these opportunities. And, there's a tendency for risk aversion, but this is not the time for that. People without a home can't work from home. People without a home end up staying in abusive relationships because where else are they going to go? Kids without a safe home are not going to get the best start in life, and our elders also need more opportunities. So there are tools on the table. There's a proposal for another 1,400 units, which I've been waiting restlessly for. And when the city is ready to move forward with that, I'm all in.
Yeah, and just to clarify for our listeners, the discrepancy between these numbers, I know that 1,700 number includes units that were renovated with federal support. So, I think that when we hear a promise about building 2,000 units, I don't think that means renovating units. It means, building new units. And when I talk to folks at the city about solving homelessness, they say one of the challenges is we just don't have the units.
Right. Can I clarify something there, Will? If we don't renovate those units, we lose that stock. So we end up having fewer units. And if we don't count those units that are not going to be renovated or that are renovated, our math will be off. So I actually think it's really important to include the units we subsidize, the units we build, and the units we renovate, because all of that addresses the availability and the accessibility and affordability of housing in our community.
Yeah, fair enough. So I've spoken to some affordable housing developers in Peterborough who said that the application process for accessing the money through the National Housing Strategy is so onerous that they just don't have capacity to do it. When I spoke to Councillor Keith Riel of the city, he said that the city assigned 4 staff people to fill out the paperwork just to get the Brock Mission loan. So I'm wondering, what would a re-elected Liberal government do to make this process easier for the kinds of community-based housing providers and nonprofits that don't have the resources and maybe don't have the capacity to access this money, it seems?
That's a really good question. And I would say for nonprofits particularly, we've offered seed funding so that they can hire somebody. So like $50,000 to hire somebody to write that application process, to go through the due diligence for these significant infrastructure projects. So we've allowed for a new stream in the National Housing Strategy to do that, and folks in our community are taking advantage of it. The reality, Will, is our challenge in this community, isn't necessarily the program itself, because we've built really strong relationships with CMHC. So there's a CMHC person and an entire shop and folks in Ottawa who know very well the opportunities and challenges in Peterborough. That's a plus for us. The city, it was the mayor through her meeting a couple of years ago, did something they'd not done before, which is assign a person to do this work, a one-stop shop for developers to go through City Hall and get the applications and get through the red tape. So there is the municipal component of it as well. And of course, when we've put forward applications in our community, we've been successful. That said, there is communities like Hamilton. Hamilton dreamed big. And just recently, they got about 145, they got $145 million to build 6,000 new units of housing in one go. It's possible for our community to do the same. And I think that coordination that is needed with City Hall, the coordination with CMHC, what I bring to the table is a lot of hand-holding through the process and advocating for these projects. I'm all in. I think part of what nonprofits and co-ops particularly will appreciate is that seed funding that creates a job for somebody to then go through the application process, so that the Indigenous consultation piece, the environmental assessments, the zoning conversations, all of that happen in a good way so that the projects are not stalled.
You spoke at the beginning of our conversation about this experience of people that are saving up for houses, but just seeing the market continually outpace them. We've seen that a lot in the last year as housing prices have really surged, which has been a real windfall for people that already own homes, but not so great for people that rent homes or that people are trying to buy their first home. I'm wondering, do you think that housing prices need to fall? And would you support government policies intended to make housing prices go down?
Yes, and we are. And that's what's on the table. People in my cohort will, and I'm sure you can appreciate, we've gone to school to get a degree, to get a good job so that we can afford things like childcare and housing and a quality of life that we thought would be attainable. And then, the market pushed us out. So then we went back to school and got a master's degree and took on more loans. And then the market pushed us out some more. What's on the table for home ownership, for young people particularly who are 40 or under, we're allowing them tools to help them save up tax-free for their first home, for that down payment. We're putting in place a 25% reduction of CMHC insurance so that these folks are saving about $6,000 a year on their mortgage. In addition to that, the commitment to a new Bill of Rights around housing is going to be significant. So I'm sure you've heard stories of people, young couples, for example, who put a bid on a home that they're like, okay, this is going to be a stretch, but we can just make it. We've saved up 5% of our mortgage and we're going to be able to get in. And they put a bid on a home and they're ready to go. And somebody unnamed, someone who, doesn't want a home inspection, someone whose bid you don't even know, puts in a bid that is $50,000 higher than what this couple can afford. That blind bidding process creates a disadvantage and inflates the price of housing in our community and across the country. What we're putting forward through the Bill of Rights, and I don't know, Bill, Will, if you've seen it, the banning of blind bidding in this home buyers Bill of Rights is the first major tenet of the commitment to bring down the price of housing. In addition to that, we're going to establish a right to home inspections so that people aren't just able to bid on a home, sight unseen and get it, or the other way around. They're told no home inspection, take it or leave it, and then they get a home stock that is not particularly helpful. There's a requirement proposed for real estate agents to disclose all participants in a transaction when they're involved in both sides of the sale. And again, that'll help bring down some of that pricing. The mortgage lenders fully informing buyers for a full range of mortgage choices that they have is also significant, because we're also seeing a lot of people, particularly vulnerable people, being taken advantage of with mortgages and loans that are obscene and increase their monthly cost and their dream to home ownership. So the protection of rights is a big piece of that. Helping young people save up so that they can afford that 5% down payment to begin with is a big piece of that. Reducing insurance costs will make a difference, save up to $6,000 a year. And then of course, making sure that the transactions that happen through that home purchase are more transparent, that their rights will make a difference. And then maybe the last thing I'll say, because I think you're ready to move on to your next question. We all know that there are commercial spaces that are sitting there empty. We all know that there are homes sitting there empty. And we're saying that for the next 2 years, we're going to ban foreign buying of homes in Canada. So if you're not a Canadian citizen, if you're not a resident in Canada, you will not be able to purchase a home. And that clears the way for Canadians who are trying to get in the market. And maybe I'll stop there because there's a bit more, but then I get into the super nerdy techie stuff.
Well, I did want to follow up on, I've got just a couple more questions, but before we move on, I'm interested in some of the critiques of the strategies to make it easier for people to buy homes, like reducing the requirements for mortgage insurance and things like that, which might make it helpful for one person to buy their house, but by making it easier for people to borrow money and giving more people money with which to buy houses, there's a critique that sort of stokes demand and will actually increase the price of housing. And I was just wondering how you think through that.
So of all the plans on the table right now for housing from the different parties, ours is the only one that proposes to build more housing supply and enable particularly young people to buy their first home and to protect their rights. So it's not just giving incentives for people to buy their first home. It's not just that incentive of rent to own a home that does require financial incentive. In addition to giving people more tools and incentives to enter the market, we're also building more housing. And that supply and demand piece that we spoke about earlier, that's why our plan is there, because we recognize that you can give folks all the incentives and all the credits and all the tax-free savings opportunities, but if the homes aren't available, then they're going to continue to be unaffordable. So we're going to build 1.4 million new homes, and that is going to address that.
What's an example of a housing initiative in Peterborough that you think has been really successful and you think that we should be replicating or looking to as a model?
Oh my goodness. Peterborough has a lot of innovative solutions and we have a lot of talent in our community to come up with new ways of meeting the unique and urgent needs of folks. On the homelessness side of things, for example, the by name list that we're moving forward with addresses the humanity of the individual, their dignity, and their unique needs. And I think that's really, really important. The city has a really solid plan to move forward in that approach, and housing the most vulnerable first is a really, really good best practice. Another one is homeward bound. Women who have experienced violence or abuse, if you don't have a safe roof over your head, you're more likely to stay in an abusive relationship. If you're couch surfing and you've left that abusive relationship, but you're couch surfing, if you've got kids or pets, you're vulnerable to all sorts of other things. Homeward bound, and this is one of the projects that we offered some seed funding to move forward. Homeward bound offers these women a safe place to call home. They offer them childcare so that they can go to school, skill up, have the supports they need, and get back on their feet and give back to society in meaningful ways. Another really good example is our partnership with Habitat for Humanity. Habitat for Humanity is an excellent model that also engages the community. And I could go on and talk about the Brock Mission approach, right? Housing the hardest to house men. So not just building a shelter, but attached to the shelter is about 15 units for the hardest to house homeless men in our community, so that they're able to heal and get the supports they need, which they otherwise wouldn't. So there are a lot of best practices in our community, and I could go on and talk about the YWCA and others, but now we have tools available through a scaled up national housing strategy for folks who can't afford a home. We have more tools available for home ownership, and we're also going to build more housing to address the supply and demand issue. And one of the things that's helped Peterborough succeed in the 1,700 plus units that have been subsidized, renovated, or built is the ideas have come from our community. The amount, my goodness, like I could go on, and I'll just stop bragging about our community now.
Yeah, I have one last question, and it's about housing as a human right. I know that the Liberal government formally acknowledged housing as a fundamental human right, but it's not exactly clear how that's going to play out in practice over the coming years. And I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to you to think about housing as a human right, and how would you like to see that right better realized in Peterborough?
It's really hard to live a secure and dignified life without a place to call home. It's just really hard. And the right to a home can only be realized if all orders of government, municipalities, Indigenous leadership, the province, and the federal government are working together to reduce red tape, to address risk aversion, to build more homes, and to help more people buy their first home, to help the most vulnerable get into a safe home, and to ensure that, for those who have additional needs, that they have the wraparound supports. We have what it takes in our community to house every single person who doesn't have a place to call home. We have what it takes in this community to build more homes so that more people, young people particularly, can get into that first home. We're closer to achieving that right to housing than we may realize, but it does require ambition. It does require collaboration, and certainly the plan that the Liberal Party of Canada is putting forward is going to achieve that by building more homes, getting people into rental units that are safe and accessible, and allowing folks the option to rent to own, because not everybody can afford that down payment right away. And then, helping young people get that first home is critical. So a re-elected Liberal government is the best bet to achieving that vision, and it is very much possible. We can see that in our lifetime. We can see that in this community. Look at what Hamilton did. More than 6,000 units in one go. That takes a lot of work, but if they can do it, certainly with the talent and the expertise we have here in Peterborough-Kawartha, we can do it too.